This is Coder Radio, episode 304 for April 9th, 2018. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and its related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Well, my name is Chris. Thank you so much for asking. But it's not about me. No, it's about our host, who's hunkered down in Florida for a special episode. Hello, Mike.
Misa here.
You made it? I thought for sure Mike had you locked up somewhere because we had a whole Slack thread about locking you back into a closet. I distinctly remember that you were locked in a closet just 5 minutes ago. I don't know how you do it, Jar Jar.
Misa can't be contained.
Well,
Misa like Miley Cyrus twerking. Oh.
Well, but Mr. Jar Jar, you're going to have to step aside because we have a special episode of the Coder Radio program this week. I've got no links. I got no tabs. I got no hoopla. I got no feedback. I got no tools, no book picks. I got nothing. I got nothing because it's sort of an introspective episode this week, and we wanted to kind of clear the decks and just sort of air it out and just kind of let happen what happened. And so Mike and I are just going to sit here quietly and just do some work today, and you guys can. Oh wait, no, okay. Would that be funny if we
that
just
would be amazing? Actually, just put like a camera, editing some video.
It's just basically us clicking and typing the whole time, and like every now and then one of us like, oh, jeez, this stupid thing,
I sort of think we should do that next week.
I know. After this week's episode, we may need to. I guess in some ways, if you're gonna give it one subject this week, it's really kind of about failure, like hard lessons learned. And really sort of actualizing and realizing failure, and some of the personal and business costs that you've experienced from some real failures that have happened to you from a little while ago. And it's why now? Because I think what we're going to talk about happened a little while ago, right?
Yeah, this happened in 2014, actually.
Yeah.
And the reason why now is, I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, and over the last few months, a lot of folks seem to be doing victory laps where they talk in somewhat vapid terms about like how they do what they do, which is fine. But I find that like deeply not helpful.
Yeah. I've noticed it too. It's like, there's several new series of podcasts that have launched looking at entrepreneurs or things like that are
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I am of the opinion that actually like failure is a better teacher than success, sort of because failure, success for one thing is not easy to define, right? While failure is much, much, much easier to define.
Yeah, fair enough.
Additionally, I don't think we would all agree on what success actually is, other than like the materialistic trappings of it. And frankly, and you can just like Google around, open your Overcast or whatever podcast text section. Many of these come off as a little, I want to say, unrealistic and preachy. An example of a line of reasoning I often see is like, company X was successful. It's the Steve Jobs with Michael Fassbender version of the truth, right? It is very edited and very inaccurate.
Yeah.
Like it highlights. I'll give you just like a vague example. Most of them follow a certain theme, right? We did something, then we just had like a gut, man, Chris, like I woke up and the spirit of the Buddha came into me, or some nonsense like that. And then people start talking about like, oh, like HubSpot, like that's not, HubSpot is doing this, right? And they talk about like their weird principles, like heart and all that kind of stuff. Now they're a very big public company now, so I think it's okay to tease them a little bit. But like, that's often not true. In the case of HubSpot, if you actually read Dan Lyon's books, you know that's not true.
Yeah, it's our story is the pitch.
Right.
This is our story. This is who we are. Come meet us. But it is exactly that. It's a story. It's a narrative, which is why like the Steve Jobs goes to India, trips on LSD, and comes back and invents the mouse, which is not true at all. I'm just saying that's the narrative gets set, and then people look for stories that reinforce that, and it does sort of create this unrealistic version of what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, and I actually think it's quite bad, though, right? You know, if you say things like we're successful because we have heart, or like, you know, just like these weird, super vapid, kind of soft Mickey Mouse sounding things, you're telling people who are either younger than you, which I know our audience definitely has a lot of like college kids, right? Or who like haven't been quite as fortunate as you, that it's necessarily like a qualitative judgment, right? And considering I've done both, right? I want to focus less on, you know, the success side of things. Not that I'm like wildly successful, but like I do okay, right? Chris does okay. Me and Chris are in the same sinking boat. I want to talk about like a time I actually straight up failed, right? Like complete failure. And I think there are more concrete lessons, you know, and we can go down a list I have here, but it worries me how mythologized this, I don't even know what to say, like pseudo spiritual crap is becoming, because you're setting, like particularly the podcasts and some of the publications that are focusing on startups now are setting these expectations of how business tends to work that are just completely unrealistic for the vast majority of people, right?
I agree. And it's though, but I'm not honing in on the damage that you think it creates. Because what it seems to me, it's like exaggerating small details into these larger picture pieces that explain a person in 4 or 5 concrete moments in their life.
Well, let me give you a concrete example of the damage it creates.
Okay.
In the pre-show, you wanted to talk about Zuckerberg before I came on, right?
Yeah, well, jokingly.
Right. So
I actually didn't want to.
No one does. If I have to see that guy's face again, I like seriously write about something else.
Yeah, I know, right?
Tech blog here.
God.
There is an epidemic, and you can actually like look this up, a statistical epidemic of like teenage depression and suicide and things like that, which is quite awful, right? Because of Facebook. And the thing that's happening is these teenagers are looking at their Facebook friends, and their Facebook friends are giving them, frankly, a bullshit curated version of their life, and they're feeling inadequate or upset. This is the business equivalent. What I see these other people doing on their podcast is the business equivalent of that. And I get why being positive might be like a better marketing move, right? I understand that, like, particularly in like the area of like development, or like, you know, being a dev shop or being a consultancy, differentiation is almost impossible to have. So anything you can claim as a differentiator, you want to do that. I understand all of that, right? And I can't claim that I don't do any of this either, right? We just published a thing called Code Values at the Mad Botter. So I am not necessarily saying I haven't done any of this ever.
It's positioning, right? Isn't that an important part of trying to establish a brand?
Yeah. So I think it's almost like a little bit of this kind of thing is necessary, is how I feel.
Okay. But
I've heard a few where I actually know the truth, and just the distance between reality and what people are promoting is pretty stark. And my fear, just to actually answer your question, is that we're going to have a bunch of very young entrepreneurs try to do things, and particularly because, you know, the developer mindset tends to be you know, prone to not the best behavior, although that pool is widening. Different types of people are becoming developers now. I think we're going to have young people in particular, or people who've been in quote unquote straight jobs and want to try something on their own, who have like wildly different expectations compared to reality, and become very hurt or very disillusioned very fast.
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I have experienced the same thing you have, where I see the narrative around something versus knowing the behind the scenes. of how it actually went down. And the two are very, very, very distant. And there's people, though, that don't know that see that and go, oh, so that's how you do it. And they try and they fail. And I don't really think, I think what the problem is, we don't really, as, how to put this? See, the issue is when you're trying to get somewhere new, you're trying to aspire, and you look at the people that may be in the position or whatever the case may be, and you think you see their formula. I think it's human nature to try to reproduce it a little bit. I think it's sort of because we're seeking out wisdom, we think we found it, and it's a real easy trap for people to fall into. The onus, while it seems like it should be on that new student or that aspiring entrepreneur to figure out the snake oil salesmen from the people that are putting out real work, you would think that works, but my hard experience shows me it does not. It's just simply a process of people are desperately seeking out information, and if you don't have the full context of the thing you're trying to learn, you don't know what's bogus, you don't know what's not true, you don't know all of the background. And it's easy to buy this, eat this stuff up, and think, oh, okay, that must be true. That must be how it works because look where they are. Look where they are. This must be true. That explains it. And so I think it's really easy to fall prey to. Like the human mind, I think, is particularly engineered to be scammed by that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I completely.
Do you feel like that happened to you to a degree?
Yeah, so this is going to be part of it, right? Like, do I feel it happened to me? I mean, I think anyone who's starting a business and is very young, like I was, is going to look for sources and teachers. I would say that no, but I'd argue that this kind of myth making wasn't as prevalent, or at least not. Either I was unaware of it. One big thing that's different now is like corporate blogs and podcasts are very big now, right? A lot of the blogs I'm thinking of and the podcasts in particular I'm thinking of are actually like marketing operations for like shops and consultancies and things like that, right? And I'm sure Chris could name 100 of them off the top of his head, but they're not the traditional, JB or I don't even know if 5x5 is still around, but right, not the traditional networks. I mean, is it fair to call them marketing content? Is that?
Yeah, it's not
that they're bad. I enjoy many of them. This is not like a value judgment.
But the way to define them is they are generally almost completely financed by the marketing budget in some capacity. Sometimes it's an in-house production. Sometimes they outsource to like a firm that does these for a bunch of different companies, and they are becoming a lot more prevalent. Some large names.
And this is something I've considered doing too, right? And the idea is to position your firm as an expert, right? So it's the same reason you would have a blog.
Exactly.
I used to do the YouTube videos on Docker. So I guess the answer to that question is no, but I will say one thing is very different, or at least it's different in my perception. There wasn't the weird vying to be the next Steve Jobs in 2008. And I don't know why people want to do that. I mean, I guess I do know why, but I literally saw a dude dressed like Steve Jobs. This must happen like every 6 months now. At every tech conference. It's like
you ought to come over to the West Coast, my friend.
Why? How bad is it worse?
I've seen it in California every time I've gone to California, so that's a pretty high hit rate.
That's to me, some of the stuff is just so crazy that I figured we could talk about it because I don't know, I can't be the only psycho in this business, right? But
you look at your Mark Zuckerberg's, your Elon Musk's, your Jeff Bezos. These are names that all come to mind now. They're like celebrity CEOs, which I think is also a Steve Jobs phenomenon. I might be wrong on that, but this whole
that's exactly
and I think it's I don't know. To me, it seems like it. I've always hated it because, in a large company that's made up of thousands of people like that, not everything is all on one woman or one man's shoulders. They have chiefs that make decisions, and they have people underneath them that make decisions, and then they have workers underneath them that are actually executing the actual work, and they're doing their own implementations of it. It's so complicated, and I've always felt like this culture of CEO celebrity that we've been brewing now for years has been more about pushing a product and selling someone as a visionary, like Jeff Bezos with his plan to go out into space, right? Same with Elon with the electric cars and SpaceX, and Tim Cook with his focus on health and taking care of humanity and privacy. Like they're all positioning themselves as like these icons for these ideals, and then they come out on stage and everybody claps like crazy, and they're really just a chief salesman. I mean, internally they're doing things, but I don't really fully understand the value it presents, because it's not reflective of what a business is actually like, what a company's actually like. It's a complete and total narrative, and we all just accept it and buy it, and we're all like, yeah, okay, all right, cool. Tim Cook just said this on MSNBC over the weekend. Did you hear what Tim Cook said? Yeah, as if Tim Cook came up with that entire thing all on his own. So I do definitely agree that this is an issue, but I actually think it may inspire more people to get into the business than it does drive people away, because people want to be Elon Musk. They want to be Steve Jobs. They want to have those headlines. They want to, be a celebrity because of their great business. I actually think, I don't know if it inspires the right people, but I think it inspires more people to get in.
So would you say, see, I don't mind, like, I mean, in fact, I enjoy when Tim Cook goes on MSNBC or CNBC, whichever it was, and slaps around Mark Zuckerberg. I think that's great. We should do more of that, please. But do you think it's bad? See, I wouldn't want to go on the limb of saying, like, I don't begrudge, like, the big CEOs their fame. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just think they should maybe be a little more.
I think it's phony. I think it's phony is what it is.
Right. I don't like the dishonesty aspect of it, or what I perceive to be dishonesty.
It's a dog and pony show that they're putting on for us. And I feel like it's one of those things where they're like, well, it'd be too hard for everybody to understand that we have all these departments. So we'll just pretend like it's all the CEO that makes all these decisions. He's a king. He's the emperor. And every day we bring him a list of all the things that need to be decided in the company. And he sits down and makes a decision on every single line item. It's just such crap. But we all pretend like okay, that's how it is. And I don't know. I could see how it definitely misleads when you combine that with these hype stories. Well, we need to tell our story. We have to tell our story around this product. We got to make sure we tell the pros what the story is for the Mac Pro. Everybody needs to understand that.
Well, there is a darker side too, right? Yeah. Theranos, like seriously, there's an actual dark side to the whole myth making thing.
What do you think it is?
I think it's Theranos, right? I think the myth becomes.
Oh, I see. So you think that then they're like chasing their own demon that they've created in a sense, like they now they have to live up to this myth?
Well, you hear about that all the time, right? In different forms, like, overhyped marketing. Remember that stupid juice machine that was like?
Oh man, yeah.
Right, like it seems to be happening more and more as we progress, which is bad. But yeah, I think I don't know what to say, right? Like I think unrealistic expectations are bad in almost everything, just like in life. But particularly bad if you're a business owner, right? Because if you have unrealistic expectations to investors or customers, eventually, that is going to catch up with you, right? You're just not going to be able to pull that off forever.
I completely agree with that. I do.
And if you have unrealistic expectations for yourself, well, that's just like not psychologically healthy.
You are doomed to failure. Yeah.
Right. All right. You're always going to be unhappy. So yeah, we should.
Let's pause there. I want to ask you about what happened in 2014 and get that side of it, figure out where all this is coming from. So let's mention DigitalOcean. Now, DigitalOcean is simplicity at scale. They have a cloud platform that you can spin up on in seconds and get great machines that you can deploy across 12 data centers all around the world. Everything is based on SSD drive, so it's rocking fast. The disk I/O is great. And then they have 40 gigabit connections coming into the hypervisors, so your network I/O is fantastic. They have network level firewalls, so you can block traffic at DigitalOcean's network level, so that stuff never even hits your machine. They have private networking that doesn't count against your transfer rate, so you can have a front-end caching box with back-end web servers or back-end databases or backup servers themselves. Predictable, easy-to-understand pricing, and the entire thing is built around developers. An easy-to-use control panel and an API that lets you spend a lot more time getting work done and less time managing your DigitalOcean infrastructure. And here's a great deal. If you go to do.co/coder, do.co/coder, no S. You can get a $100 60-day credit. When you create a new account, you can play around for $100 worth of DigitalOcean rigs. Now that's something, because my more than enough system that I never tap out, because I'm just doing like multiple video streams, audio stream conversions, and running chat rooms and bots and things like that. Nothing major. 3 cents an hour. 3 cents an hour for that thing. So a $100 credit, you could try out some of their massive CPU optimized systems with the latest Intel Xeon processors. You could try out their flexible droplets where you can mix and match disk or CPU or RAM. It's a really flexible system with great documentation, tutorials for days. Oh, how to use duplicity with GBG to back up data to DigitalOcean Spaces. Well, isn't that nice? Yeah, DigitalOcean Spaces is another great feature of DigitalOcean. S3 standard, easy to use spaces. You could use it connected to your droplet, or just spin up a URL space and drop some files on there and send somebody a link, and then you can have it set to self-destruct even. It's just great for that. They also have block storage, which you can attach to a rig, and it just shows up as a device. I love all of that. Pre-built applications, global availability, optimized compute types, and team support. There's so much to enjoy. And then there's tons of good community code built around it. dio.co/coder. Go there to sign up and get a 100-day trial. DigitalOcean.com. I've been using it for years. Go see why. dio.co/coder. All right, Mr. Dominic. So kind of walk us through what did happen in 2014. We were doing the show then, right? Yes, we were.
Yeah, we were. We started the show in 12.
So, yeah. Okay.
So few things that happened before, right? One, I am intentionally focusing on the negative.
Yeah.
My intent is not to like actively discourage people or anything, but this is just more of a balance thing, right?
I agree. I think it's good to have that.
Right. So I don't want to give an impression that's like overly negative.
Yeah, okay.
Is why I'm saying. So I started up disclaimer. This is my disclaimer. And again, I also did many things correctly, but we're going to focus on the things I did wrong. 2008, I started up fine, right? Really caught the beginning of the iOS SDK, was one of 3 like dev shops in quotes doing iOS in New Jersey, which was great. I was a one-man band for a while, occasionally had a person, all that kind of good stuff. And see, something I didn't think, things were going well. I mean, we all remember 2008. Well, maybe all of us don't, but if you were an iOS developer in 2008, 2009, 2010, really all the way up to like 2013, it was things were pretty good, right? Contracts were coming at you faster than you can do, and because it was so rare, there was a lot of leeway on everything. So I'm getting bigger, right? And I decide that it might not be the worst idea to do a little bit of expansion over the years, right? So we fast forward, add a little bit of Android, a little bit of Rails. We got kind of more of a stack thing going on. And
I assume you're probably bringing on some people too to help.
Bringing on some people, right? Bringing on some people. Got offices now. I don't want to say that like multi-year period was perfect. And of course, like everybody else in his first year in business, I screwed up my taxes, right? And I didn't realize how high taxes were. So like I made that mistake, but then you just pay it and you're fine. Dumb stuff, right? Like forgetting, nothing major. So we fast forward into 2014. I think we're roughly 14 people, and we have a pretty heavy division between what I would consider customer service and devs. So I think it's almost a half and half. Actually, I think at one point it was 7 and 7. So we had gotten there by basically making the initial mistake. My early clients were what, and actually I do have a book recommendation, I just didn't link it. If you've ever read, have you read it, Chris? Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm?
I think I've heard of it, but I have not read it.
Okay. He talks about different kind of like market personas you can think about. And this is my first blunder. This is what starts everything off a bad road. I failed to realize that the reason I was successful originally was because I was dealing with what Jeffrey Moore calls the visionary. And the visionaries are interesting, right? Because they want to take risk, and for our purposes, from a technology perspective, they want to be on the bleeding edge, which is great, right? Because it means a couple things. It means, one, they might be willing to pay more. Although another mistake was I was way undercharging. And they tend to be very forgiving on things like business processes and kind of the overhead of dealing with other groups of people, which I'm going to get into. They started to go away. And at the same time, prices started rapidly, or I perceive it, this is another mistake, the market I was in, the prices seemed to be rapidly falling, because now we're in 2014 and there's just like tons of template apps, right? There's tons of offshore competition.
Yep.
And
I remember talking a lot about that.
Remember how I was just desperately scrambling to find a good cross-platform solution purely to cut costs.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you think about it, if I have a guy who does iOS, a guy who does Android, someone who does Rails, all these people have to be paid and they're all very specialized. So I didn't recognize this, right? You got to remember, I'm talking now at 4 years of hindsight. The first sign was we started getting sort of different customers. These weren't really enthusiastic people because as the market matured, more, for lack of a better term, boring companies were wanting mobile apps now, right? And for them, it was new, but they have, very different requirements if you think about servicing that kind of customer. Let me give you kind of the classics example. For years, it was sufficient for me just to like email people, right? And I actually find that email is one of the most effective ways to communicate with customers because you have something that you can go back to and say, well, I thought you meant this.
100%.
Where I got sucked into the world of like a GoToMeeting, right?
Yeah.
And while I understand that a lot of businesses just like rely on meetings, I personally find it a bad way to communicate information. And I also found that what would happen is you'd have, there's one terrible case where I had 14 people in one meeting and it was like that old kids game of telephone, right? We all knew we agreed to something. No one knew what it was.
Oh, it's so stressful.
And that led to more conflicts. So I incorrectly, this is mistake number 2, decided to hire all these customer service people, which almost doubled us in size pretty fast. Because one, my thinking was, because they're relatively affordable compared to developers, right? And it was that they could just absorb the slack in this process. What I didn't understand, and I've been thinking about this for years, and it took me up until like really this year to figure this out. I accidentally crossed from the tech enthusiast market, right, from the people who want the newest technology, into a more pragmatic market.
Oh, yes. Where they place a totally different value on this stuff.
Right. But I didn't change my pricing. So one reason that you will find that like dev shops in general, even the ones who claim that they like to work with entrepreneurs, will only work with like VC funded entrepreneurs or people who are really going to bet the farm, or indeed they prefer to work with big companies, is it is expensive to service accounts like that.
Yeah.
Which means you just have to charge a lot more. And when I say I wasn't charging enough, I think we had people just coming in at like $60 an hour at the time. Yeah. So it was like grossly under the market.
Yeah. And this is a totally different kind of customer. So it's a more costly customer. So
and we did not bill. Oh, this is the other key. We didn't bill project management time at all.
I remember. I kind of remember our discussions back then. It's like, well, you even at some points tried, but they like would look at you like you're ridiculous. You want us to? That's your job. Why would we pay for? Yeah.
Well, and the answer was it is right, but in that market, you need to be charging more like $150 an hour, and then you can afford to do that effectively. The other really dumb thing I did was I structured and you're gonna hate this because I know you do ad sales. I structured my salespeople's commissions such that they got paid for closing the sale, regardless of what happened to the contract. So what ended up happening, and I'm sure you can figure this out, the sales guys were always incentivized to basically say whatever the hell they needed to say to close the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would get paid a full commission, even if we lost money on the project.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because they did their job. You didn't retain it, but they did. I mean, they closed the sale.
See, that's an interesting. I'm surprised you didn't throw up on that, because in my mind, I realize what I would do today is you actually should be paid on retention, and here's why. Because what we do was custom, it still is. We had a really nasty thing that kept happening where sales reps would intentionally avoid things that might scare the client, but were material to figure. And remember, we were fixed bid at the time too, right? But we were material to what it would actually cost us to do the job.
I actually am. It does bother me. I'm just not surprised in the least, having seen it happen. That is exactly the way it works. And it's like that through the entire company. It's not just the salespeople. They always go to where their incentives are. And so one thing I saw, because I watched a company, I benefited a lot when before I became an independent contractor. I worked for a company as an employee where I had medical benefits, and they were doing all of the overhead, including experimenting with bringing on salespeople. So I watched them go from no salespeople to a couple of salespeople, and watched a couple people leave and a couple people come on board. And that same thing happened where the salesperson was really, they weren't like trying to scam anybody. They were just very, very much aligned to what their incentive was. And so they would say something because they didn't know technically what was or wasn't possible. They would say, yeah, we could do that. No problem. Yeah, we can do that. And then it would come back to us and we're like, holy shit, what did he commit us to? We can't do that. That would take X, and back and forth. But of course, now the customer's been sold on it, and it's a good gig, and et cetera, et cetera. So what I saw them sort of transform to was some sort of like initial closing deal incentive, and then a percentage over a period of time when that customer is retained. And I remember a lot of people didn't like that outside the sales area, because essentially they're taking a spiff off of or a skiff, whatever, off of every client that you have for doing nothing, really, after a while, is how people saw it. I don't, anyways, I just know, I don't know if that was the solution, that sort of retainer incentive
That's really
percentage,
interesting.
but that's what they were attempting at the time when I wrapped up. Yeah.
Yeah, a solution I thought of but never ended up implementing because we ended up just not having any more salespeople was you would be paid, like you said, a small commission for closing the initial sale, but your commissions would be reevaluated every quarter based on how many of your projects hit their target for profitability, which salespeople did not like, right? That was very unpopular. And you can imagine what I think of software salespeople.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's yeah, I mean, that's actually another, I didn't even have this on the list, but one thing that also changed was it became very hard to get paid for discoveries in 2014. And the reason for that, and this was just a pure market competition thing, the bigger shops or shops of roughly my size were just charging a lot more. So they kind of baked that into their structure, right? And the offshore shops just like didn't do discoveries. They kind of just,
oh no, why bother?
Yeah, why bother? So we ended up having like a very expensive sales process relative to the size of the deals.
Sure, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that is particularly challenging. Still kind of challenging to today, I would imagine, actually, that particular aspect.
Yeah, that's still super challenging.
Well, so I have a couple more questions for you, because a lot of what I've heard, which is interesting because of our preamble where we were talking about how setting the story and making this culture of these CEO celebrities is setting bad expectations for people coming into the market. A lot of what we talked about does kind of come down to expectations. Expectations with the sales team, expectations on a lot of like what your customer base was going to be. So I think we should probably talk about how you change expectations when your market is maturing, and maybe talk about. I have a personal thing that I'd also like to bring up.
Go.
So we'll do that. But first, let's mention our friends at Linux Academy. They help us keep this show going, and we appreciate them so much. And it's a service that constantly gets better. Check it out at linuxacademy.com/coders. You can sign up there for a free 7-day trial and support the show. It's a full-featured training library with everything you need to learn new skills and advance your career on all of the technologies built around Linux and the core essential technologies of Linux itself, with hands-on scenario-based labs that give you real experience on their servers. They have full-time instructors, human beings that are there to help you when you need them, and they have a course scheduler that when you're really busy is very, very valuable. But check this out. It's a big, big launch over at Linux Academy. In the month of April, they're launching 70 new courses, new challenges, and new learning activities. I knew this was coming. A little birdie had given me a hint, and they'd had some live streams. I kind of knew this was coming. So but to actually see it in writing, it just so underscores how great this company is and how they just keep getting bigger and better all the time. They've really established themselves as a legitimate training platform in the entire industry. So now Linux Academy on the resume looks really good. So that's extremely valuable too. That's why one of the things they've rolled out is public profiles. So as you go through the Linux Academy courseware and you complete different sections, there's essentially like a GitHub style profile that shows the work you've completed. You can add that to the resume or link that to your employer, especially if you've got an employer that helps out with funding of the training. And you can try it 7 days for free at linuxacademy.com/coders. That's linuxacademy.com/coders. And a big thank you to Linux Academy. All right, Mr. Dominic, so let's chat about adjusting expectations, because there is a theme here, and it's really busted expectations. You know, it's almost like misinformed expectations, I guess, or what would be another way to put it would be really just sort of being naive expectations. That's probably it. It's naive expectations.
Yeah.
You don't know until you do it.
You don't know until you do it, right.
So how do you change them, especially when the market's changing, that you're trying to serve?
So there's multiple types of expectations, right? Like I had the expectation that you are doing something with like 3 people. So, just, multiply by X and that's how big you can be, but run the exact same process. No.
Yeah.
That's that expectation.
Oh man.
Nine women can't have a baby in a month, right? It's the old mythical man month problem. Yeah,
I guess it seems so obvious when you say it. It seems so obvious. But man, I made the same mistake. I know, and not to make it about me, but I know I made that same mistake, and I'm only really just kind of recently figuring it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, this would be interesting to ask you, because one thing I didn't anticipate was I find when you hit certain size thresholds that you actually have to take your process back down to the studs and just say, does this still make sense? And let me give you just like a really quick example. Originally, our process for bug tracking was text files in Dropbox.
Sure.
What the hell? First there was just me, right? So it didn't really matter. And our process for customer communications was email, which I still stand by email for like formal communications.
Yeah.
But when you have like multiple people on a project and somebody doesn't get CC'd and then asks the same question and the customer gets mad because you're bothering them, like there's all kinds of like ways where things break down. Like I find, 1 to 3 people runs one way, but once you add that like 4th or 5th person, somehow you actually lose efficiency, right? Like the person's not additive. I mean, they're obviously additive, but they're not like 100% additive, right? Because someone now has to manage the process.
It's managing. It's getting more people to buy off on the idea. It's additional people who have opinions on how things should be done. It's other people who may have other things that are primary motivators in their life, and work not being one of them. I mean, there's all kinds, right? And I'm just listing a few examples. That's just the culture begins to change, and sometimes for the better when you bring people on, and sometimes for a lot better for quite a while. It's not always a bad thing, but it does fundamentally change the team dynamic. And when that happens, the work changes. The product is a reflection of the team, of the business itself.
Well, there's an old quote about, I think it was about Microsoft, that like every software company ends up coding according to their corporate structure.
Right. Oh, right. What
which
is
I
that?
found was basically true.
I'll Google it for a second.
Yeah, you should Google that because I was very. You see, part of the problem was at that point in my life, I had never actually met like a good project manager, so I did not believe they were necessary. And it turns out that devs, in general, except for like super senior ones, aren't the best PMs. Our QA guy like hated one of the developers and vice versa. My dogs also hated him. So at some point, like by 2014, I think we'd adopted Jira because that's when we started using Atlassian. And I at one point had to like intervene just on the ridiculous tickets that were being opened. Like it would be like functionality does not work, right? Mm-hmm. But only for this one guy. So that kind of crap really, really took me by surprise. That ended up not working out.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I can't find the quote, but maybe somebody listening can send it in or something because I know exactly what you're talking about. And so I want to go back just to, you said every now and then you feel like you need to strip it down to the studs and sort of reevaluate. Doesn't that seem like in a way, like you're always going to be hitting the reset button. You're always going to be losing momentum in the direction. You'll always be sort of resetting to zero, which, I mean, not always the case, but I do feel like we've done that a bit. Like when we've been restructuring some of the shows, changing things up a bit, and like, TechSnap is not as big of a show as it used to be anymore. It's growing in a new direction, but it used to be a much larger show. When Alan and I did TechSnap as a video show, it probably got 20,000 more downloads. That started that.
Really?
Yeah, I mean that went away before we rebooted TechSnap. TechSnap is now, the rebooted TechSnap is doing better than the TechSnap it's replacing because it's just that format just wasn't working for folks. So it's going in the right direction, but it did feel a lot like hitting the reset button completely and just sort of, I mean, kind of taking like the DNA of the original product and going in a new direction. I don't know how to put it, but it didn't entirely feel clean because it's like if I'm spending a ton of effort, boy, I'd love to be building on top of something, building on a success. And in a way I was, but in not how I actually envisioned things would be when I was coming into doing this job, like coming into being a businessman. I pictured things going a little differently. I don't disagree with your statement, but it feels a bit like failure in itself, like having to strip everything down and restart.
I don't see that in itself as failure. I mean, I think when you're small, you have very few advantages. And being nimble and being able to pivot quickly.
That is a great point.
Your primary strength. Like let me use JB as an example.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I know you agree with that, right? And like so, but you have a point. I don't think your objection is wrong. I think it's just a different way of looking at it. Like let me give you an example. I could have, instead of doing what I did and trying to like expand so like I had this idea that instead of just doing iOS development, we would do iOS, Android, and the web backend, right? Kind of to like be a one-stop shop. There is a very strong argument that I'm still not sure I buy, but like people have said this to me in the past, that what I ought to have done was just hardcore double down on iOS, right? Done iOS only. And I do think fooling around with the hybrid stuff wasn't great. Not because hybrid's necessarily bad. I do think hybrid is good for a lot of things, but I was focusing on hybrid for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah, I follow.
And I could have positioned myself in the original company as just a pure 100% Apple, iOS, Mac expertise shop. I didn't do it.
Do you think it was because it would have required you to be ruthless and fire people and drop clients and things like that? Or was it because you didn't think it was the future?
So that's actually something I want to get into. The reason I didn't do it was because I was stupid, right? Now, whether it was, I don't want to get in an argument because I know this is the commerce. We're going to get people saying like whether Apple and iOS is a good thing I should have targeted or not. Let's say any technology, right? Let's ignore that. Let's say I didn't do it because I didn't understand Kind of getting back to that telling your story stuff we were making fun of before. I didn't understand that the story I ended up telling was we can do a full stack solution, but we are no different than anybody else other than being very cheap, which was stupid. But the ruthless thing, it's funny because I actually wanted to put that in here. I have a line, as you see in the doc, that says there really are no bad guys, right? Like, I did not intend to fail, right? I did not intend to have to lay people off. My clients who some of which creep scope and cause me problems, were not like out to get me, right? Like, no one wakes up and says, I want to contract with the shop and then I want to change my mind in the middle of the project just to be a jerk, right?
Yeah.
Like, those people don't exist. I mean, I guess maybe if they were like mentally ill, maybe there is someone like that, but I do think I was afraid of being perceived as an asshole and as a crook that I didn't be ruthless enough. I could have, and this is the part that kind of chaps my ass to this day, I could have prevented this. I would have had to fire or lay off almost everybody doing customer support in one fell swoop, right? It would have just been kind of like a Night of the Long Knives type move. I would have had to very aggressively gone to customers who had fixed big contracts that were in distress because they changed their mind or whatever, scope reasons, and just thrown down a gauntlet. See, I was a little afraid of conflict, I think, actually, is what happened. And I needed to just say, here's the deal. You're above your scope. You can either pay more or not, right? And I should have just been, I should have been more ruthless. But not in like a conniving, mean way, but
in a selfish way, in a way.
So one thing I didn't understand...
And hold on, before you go. A selfish way is not necessarily bad. It's your business.
Right. And like, a relationship, a business relationship has to be mutually beneficial. Like, this is one thing I try to explain to people when they tell me like that they just don't have budget to do anything or whatever, or, you always hear about somebody who feels they got ripped off by a web developer, right? I hear it all the time. And what I tell them is, well, I'm sure you're telling me the truth, but the way I view things is, the relationship has to work for all parties. So you can't try to like a common thing is, well, I want this other thing that may or may not be in the scope, and I'm not going to accept the work if you don't do it. My answer to that today is, okay, that's nice, right? Like, seriously, great. And if you want, I'm not giving you anything back, so sue me. And I've also resolved that by not doing fixed bids, right? I'm getting rid of my last one today, actually. So it is not wrong, right, as a vendor to protect yourself. It is also, I would say to any of you who are like contracting with dev shops, if the dev shop begins to lose money, they're just like not going to be able to do your project, right?
I wonder yeah, that's true.
Right,
okay,
like
continue.
You can't. You actually don't want, and this is something I learned. You never want to rip off a customer, right? You never want to like overbid and pull the wool over their eyes.
Yeah,
which is never going to happen anyway because there's always scope creep. But the customer, you shouldn't think of it as a transaction because really everything is going to need to be maintained. And in the best case, if you, and this is something I didn't do, but I should have, if someone snows you on a project, like gets you to do, like we had one guy who got us to do like 500 hours of work for 150 hours because we misbid something. The right thing to do would have been to just like not do any more work for him. Right.
Yeah.
Like that is the right answer, even if he's in a lurch because he needs something changed in production. Because unfortunately, I guess I do have to be a ruthless prick. I don't know what to tell you. Right?
Yeah, I think
like that is a lesson I learned.
I think that's I think I've looked back at some things in some of my business choices where I've gone, if I would have followed my gut back then, I would have had to make a lot of really, to the other people, would have seemed like heartless decisions. And I think I didn't want to be heartless. I think that's part of it. But I think also it was combined with conflict avoidance, which played a big role. And I do think that perhaps that's something that people perhaps also underappreciate, is how the tendency for us to want to avoid conflict can make us put off decisions that I think maybe sometimes that's why people who have some social disorders are better at running businesses, because they don't have that filter. They don't have that anxiety about conflict. They just say, this isn't working, you're fired. I mean, I don't know how else to think about it, because when I think about some of the decisions I would have had to have made, they are so gut-wrenchingly mean or difficult that it, to me, was almost just worth having the business not be as successful. And I think in part of it's because of the amount of conflict it would require. And other times it's just simply because I guess I don't want to have to be that ruthless to get the job done. I think that plays a role too, and that's sort of when I get to that fork in the road. So far, every time I've chosen to take the less ruthless fork, but I look back and I go, I do believe had I been on 3 or 4 occasions, I wouldn't call them regrets, but upon reflection, had I gone with my more aggressive instinct, I think I'd probably be in a better financial position, or maybe the business would be in a different position. I don't know. But it does sometimes rattle around in my head as I'm on a long drive or something. And it's, I think, something that people going into business need to fully appreciate, how sometimes what's holding you back and holding your revenue, your company back, and all of it is you. And the fact that you are a bit of a wuss when it comes to conflict, because it's kind of human nature, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah, I've had to learn how to kind of embrace conflict, and it doesn't happen very often, but there has, and I'm wondering if this is your experience too. There has never been a case, and I've been doing this now for 10 years, when I saw a deal going bad and not going head on and saying, this isn't going right, we need to fix it, this is a process to fix it. We're avoiding that and sometimes very heated conversation, right? Because people, oftentimes fixing things, you have to turn around and say, listen, you asked for 10 things. I need you to write them all up in a document, date it, and then we can, negotiate on what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're doing fixed scope work. In any case where I didn't do something like that, though, which again was very uncomfortable. And I mean, there was a time when one guy was yelling at me, really very, very uncomfortable. But when I don't do it, or when I hadn't done it, always a worse outcome for everyone.
Yep, I 100%.
And it also helps you separate people who, because see, part of project management is the client has to manage their own side of the project, right? And it's really telling that, I've worked with lots of different types of organization, lots of different types of people. The ones who work with you and understand that it's a collaborative process, always get the best bang for their buck and the better outcome. The ones who think that they're trying to get everything they can, even if those projects ship, it's not good, right? Because you have no incentive to work with them again. Mm-hmm. And if they need something, you probably are just going to, and this is another thing, learning to say no, right? You know what, this isn't right for us. That's again another very conflict-rich area.
Yeah, especially if you're in a position where you need the money, or you need that work, or you got somebody that's their type of work and they're sitting there idle. So boy, wouldn't it be great to bring that on right now?
I've done it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a challenging position. And I think it comes back to something that I'm appreciating a lot more in the last, I'd say 3 months, but I've been working my way there for 2 years, is focus. And sort of whittling it down. And every time I feel like I focus in, I realize, oh man, this is a lot deeper and I got to focus in more. And I think in that process, it sort of necessitates a bit of ruthlessness, which I am getting more acquainted with as we go through some of these changes. But it's still sort of outside my comfort zone, which I think is a good thing. But I've been outside this comfort zone for a few months now, and I'm okay, I'm ready to kind of bring things back and just get things regular again, because now I figured out what the focus is, and I know kind of what the future direction is. But there's so many ripple effects from the changes that the comfort zone is still quite a ways out, I think, which is probably good for now, but it's getting a little tiring.
Yeah, I mean, although, I don't like the word ruthless. I really think it's more assertive, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because ruthless implies a level of burn the forest down.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is that. I think the reason why, because I feel like you have to almost think of it as being selfish in a way but it's selfish for the business, not yourself. It's like, you know what I mean? And I don't.
Well, let me give you a hypothetical then.
Okay.
If at the end or Q3, the end of Q3 2014, things really took the turn, right?
Yeah.
If I had been more ruthless, as you say, I could have saved the jobs of at least 7 or 8 people, theoretically, right? Like if I had turned on products that weren't either paying on time or had some sort of issue like that, or any of the things that were just not being done right, maybe let go of people who weren't producing at a high enough level, I definitely could have saved people's jobs, right? Is that really ruthless, or is that, you see what I mean? Like ultimately,
it's not always ruthless. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Sometimes it's
Like,
okay.
And one thing you'll find this funny, I think. People are really good at pretending to be offended by things that they just don't care, right? I have found that like there are some pretty sleazy people in the world that will just like act like super offended, like you're like telling them they have to pay more for scope creep is like you just like killed their dog.
Yeah,
like really, like, and you just have to stop caring. Is I guess my thing here.
Or reset your filter on people's reactions, I suppose. Sort of what I've been thinking. I've been thinking about that a little bit too recently. It was like a lot of people just throw stuff at me, and these last few weeks have just been like, oh, you guys, oh gosh, here we go again. And it's like everything, because it's a freak out culture these days, and it's just getting worse.
There are people for which that's a process, right? Like I no longer a client, this guy, but he had a way that every conversation had to begin with some like outlandish accusation.
Oh man.
And
sort of put you on the defensive, so that was that like a negotiation tactic here?
Right. So I figured out after like 6 months of it that he's just trying to put us on the defensive.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's just trying to rattle our cage.
Oh man, that's stressful too.
And so what I started doing was answering the phone and saying, "You're right, I did it." Wouldn't say hello. Didn't even let him talk.
Like you're onto him.
How does he respond?
He knows you're onto him. Yeah.
And that stopped that. So.
That's funny. Well,
yeah.
So now what? I mean, what's next? So it seems like you've been reflecting on this. Are you incorporating this into future work? I mean, like, where's this go now? That's what I've been trying to figure out.
So I've been through very similar to what you've been doing at JP, actually, a process of, I would definitely say, trimming, trying to find focus. Relocating to Florida was I think more of a disruption than I would have hoped. But yeah, I'm trying to focus on one vertical, which is aerospace, and hopefully get lean. I think one of the disadvantages we both have is that the technology market is always moving very quickly.
Yes.
I've
also an advantage as well.
It is an advantage, right? I've also decided that I basically need to target like the tech visionaries within these large organizations who want to try something new. And it's just because of how small we are right now, it's not worth it to try to go for what Jeffrey Moore would call the pragmatists, which are basically the people who want you to have like an account rep and, all kinds of like...
all the infrastructure around that.
Yeah, I didn't even know. All the boring crap, right? Excel sheets, things like that.
Yeah, the management layer stuff that makes everybody comfy and helps defer responsibility, but also tends to lead to very larger contracts, but there's like a give and take there.
Well, there's a give and take. And in the vertical I'm working in, it's such that we're always like subcontracting or co-subcontracting. So it's a little different. I mean, I've decided no more fixed bids, period, for any reason.
Attaboy. Proud of you.
I actually ended on Sunday a long-time white label subcontracting deal because it just things were getting a little too uncomfortable, and it just wasn't it wasn't in the direction I need to be going in.
Times be changing for you, Mr. Dominic.
Yeah, that's
it's
and hey, if I go broke, I'll come with you and Lady Jukes, and we'll
I'm so down for that. We'll just start like Mike and Chris's podcasting. You know what we could do is
pub crawl.
We should roll the podcasting industry like outsourced development has rolled the development industry. We could do it, Mike. You know what? We could go in there and we could just, because all of these companies are going to want to do marketing blitzes on podcasts and YouTube videos, and we'll just outsource all of it. We'll pretend like we're part of those companies. We'll totally white label the whole thing. I think you and I could nail this. So that'll be our plan B. Okay.
I actually think we could. good, and I'm shocked that that's not already a thing.
It is kind of becoming a thing, but I think we still have a chance. We have a chance still.
Holy crap! If anybody's looking to like start an agency, there you go. That's
yeah. All right, Mr. Dominic, where do you want people to go throughout the week?
Go to themadbotter.com and follow me at Dumanuko.
I like that advice. That's strong, good advice. Check me out on the Twitter at ChrisLAS. Go check out the TechSnap program. Great companion, really, to this show, techsnap.systems over there. And then join us live. You can get our live time at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Oh, and give us some emails. Let's fill that mailbag for next week's episode. We didn't do any emails. Give us some thoughts on whatever we talked about today. Coder.show/contact. In fact, Coder.show for all of the show's resources, including subscribe links to everything we talked about today, and more. Coder.show. Thanks for joining us. See you back here next Monday.